So I just watched Oppenheimer in IMAX, and the only word I can describe it with is just wow. I rarely ever leave the theater absolutely speechless and shaken. Oppenheimer left me with just one feeling. Cinema can just be so special. With Christopher Nolan coming from a quote-unquote rating drought from critics in his last three movies, having had Tenet and Interstellar receiving scores in the 70s and 60s, this was a litmus test for critics to see whether the brilliant director still had it in him to create stories that provoke some incredibly meaningful character writing. And boy, he brought it. I do want to pause this vid real quick to say, how the hell did Interstellar even get a 73? Absolutely ridiculous. That movie is incredible. And before we get into this video, I'd like to issue a spoiler warning for Oppenheimer. Go watch it. It's a truly stunning movie that sets itself apart from anything the box office has seen in a long time. When this movie was announced 2 years ago after Tenet, I was so excited. The possibility of Nolan getting a chance to cover the Manhattan Project was truly tantalizing. And to even base the movie around one of the true brilliant minds of our times was something that really made me set high expectations. Not to mention the star-studded cast, which absolutely did not temper any expectations. It felt like Nolan was preparing to go all out. But did the movie meet my expectations? Of course it did. To say it met my expectations would be an absolute understatement. In its essence, this movie fits perfectly into Nolan's hands. If you think about it, a very intelligent man dealing with huge moral issues is something that Nolan's movies are always centered around. This movie was a true masterclass into the adaptation of historical contents into film. Nolan achieves this through specific storytelling and filmmaking techniques. The use of color is the most distinctive visual aspect of this movie, with the color scenes being Oppenheimer's perspective and the black and white scenes being Lewis Strauss's perspective. Nolan employs two completely opposing perspectives to allow the audience to indulge in understanding the full story of the Manhattan Project from both sides. By throwing the audience straight into the story without giving any build-up, using these color and black and white cues helps viewers to gain better understanding of immediate context and story beats without needing narration. Another brilliant move by Nolan was to use multiple court hearings that were held across the 1950s to set the stage of the narrative. This offers the movie to jump in and out of certain parts of Oppenheimer's life through the judges referencing these events without having abrupt cuts or weird shifts in tone. This also helps put Oppenheimer's life and his journey through a wider lens, showing the influence of his life and his decisions in a bigger context in American and worldwide politics. By weaving in the black and white filter onto these courtroom hearings, Nolan also manages to allow Strauss and his political journey into the context of Oppenheimer. While to some people, these trials felt a bit overbearing, confusing, or long, the hearings become the thread that defines the third act of this movie. By the way, 99% of the people who watch my videos are not subscribed. Come on, man, what is this? Get subscribed. The cinematography in this movie is stunning, with Hoyte van Hoytema returning to combine with the efforts of Nolan to produce yet another visual masterpiece, making even the most unremarkable rooms and the dull scientific conversations extremely interesting. Hoytema manages to keep the viewers engaged with incredible close-up shots, sweeping wide shots, and some beautiful still shots sprinkled throughout the movie, not to mention the beautiful set piece of the successful atomic bomb tests. He also manages to capture the incredible shots that depict the atoms and the waves that Oppenheimer visualizes throughout his early years, and brings them to life to stun the audience. Something that I really appreciated from this movie is showing firsthand the horror of creating the atomic bomb, and how heavily it would weigh on an individual to have created a weapon that could potentially end the world. As we saw Oppenheimer being warned from the start of the project by fellow scientists, his attitude of having the United States own the weapon rather than Germany to prevent potential catastrophe drove the first act of the movie. Yet, as the project nears completion and Oppenheimer starts to realize the mistake that he's made, Nolan also makes sure to highlight the potential self-serving tendency of Oppenheimer's pleas to shut the operation down and to not expand into making hydrogen bombs. The movie manages to show the horror that a person can experience while creating a true weapon of mass destruction, yet does not ignore the very human ego of a brilliant person such as Oppenheimer, who was denied his all-access security clearance by Louis Strauss. After all, why wouldn't the man who invented the atomic bomb, having experienced all the glory from it, want the hydrogen bomb project to continue without him leading or being involved? Strauss had a point, but his point was always twisted by the humiliation that he experienced by Oppenheimer in the export of nuclear isotopes court hearing. I also want to highlight the star-studded cast that Nolan gathered in this movie, with some Oscar-worthy performances from the likes of Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr. Having been casted in the leading opposite perspectives of the movie, both deliver absolutely incredible results in their roles. Cillian Murphy really portrays all parts of Oppenheimer so well, from the troubled youth in Cambridge to the confident scientist and the capable man-managing leader in the Manhattan Project. He also nails the downfall of Oppenheimer, as he wears thin from the hearings and the struggles with the prospect of having created a device that could end humanity instantly. Robert Downey Jr. was also phenomenal, having portrayed Louis Strauss to near perfection, even looking quite similar to him in real life. His mannerisms and his dialogue delivery was on point, and I would be very surprised if he doesn't win Best Supporting Actor for this role. Matt Damon, Florence Pugh, Emily Blunt were highlights too, and they bring this movie to a level where it feels extremely natural, rather than a movie that was filmed with characters. Now, the soundtrack for this movie was phenomenal, with Ludwig Göransson returning to work with Nolan yet again. As usual, the work is very good, but the soundtrack was overbearing at times, making it hard to hear certain dialogues in the movie. This is a repeat issue that Nolan movies seem to carry now, and that definitely needs to be worked on. Other than that, yet another great soundtrack from Ludwig Göransson. Another thing that I do want to lightly touch on is that when the bomb does go off in the nuclear test, it felt slightly underwhelming. Don't get me wrong, the scene is incredible and it's a phenomenal climax, but it did not feel as grand as it should have been. Of course, it was all done by practical effects, which is incredible. And I'm not expecting Nolan to detonate a nuclear bomb for this movie, but yeah, it was a tiny bit underwhelming. That's all for my complaints. In my opinion, Nolan's greatest strength is his ability to sew together the different narrative strings that he weaves in the first and second acts of his movies. When the third act starts taking shape, these threads join together with the advent of some phenomenal twists. Character arcs, narrative climaxes, and thematic crescendos come together to create a brilliant, vibrant, and beautiful yarn of cinematic storytelling. I'm going to keep it short for this video, but make sure you definitely go watch Oppenheimer in IMAX if possible. Nolan's movies are always amazing, yet this feels like it's one of his best ever. An extremely beautiful story of a man who changed the world. Thank you, Christopher Nolan.